Hey everybody. So I am attempting here to do a quick sort of series of video snippets that recap important points and elements from the Toynbee Cooley that we didn't get to spend a whole lot of time on in class, so that you kind of have those foregrounded for you before the second test, but also, like as you're working on your essays and that kind of thing. So this is the first video in that series. Cross your fingers that it goes well and Canvas cooperates when I try to upload these and all that jazz. Bottom of page 93 in your PDF and the top of page 94, there's this passage where Fraech and Cahoon are fighting at the ford, and Cahoon asks him, or he says to him, "I will spare you now," and Fraech says, "I would not have said that," and so Cahoon grabs him and shoves him under the water again and drowns him, and Fraech dies. And, there's bad and sad and whatever, but what I want to point out here is that even if this is your first time hearing, like you're sitting around the campfire or you're sitting around the hearth or whatever, and this is your first time hearing this particular part of the Cahoon saga, even so, you can already predict what's going to happen to Fraech as soon as he goes into single combat against Cahoon. You already know, not because you know that Cahoon, not because you know, this guy's particular story, but because it's like you don't have to have seen every episode or every short of the Looney Tunes? I think it's Tunes. I don't watch a lot of TV, can you tell? But you don't have to have seen every one of them, like you don't have to have seen a particular one in order to predict that Bugs Bunny is going to outsmart Elmer Fudd again, or that the Roadrunner is going to get away from Wile E. Coyote. You may not know how this time, but how Bugs Bunny outwits Elmer Fudd this time is the question, not whether he's going to succeed. And it's like that kind of a thing with Cahoon and all of these single combat instances. If you are a member of this audience, and it's your first time hearing this particular story, you may not know how Cahoon is going to win, but you know that he is going to win. And that's important to understanding, the setup here and how these stories fit together and what the sort of listening context is. So there's that, and also there's this really interesting little passage where the watching Connacht's army sees these women dressed in green come and take Fraech's body out of the ford and away under a hill. Those people are the She, and it's spelled a few different ways. I spelled it like the sort of most common spelling. I think your book only says S-I-D, but it's pronounced She, and it's people, that's what it translates to, kind of, sorta. And it's related to the term banshee. If you've ever heard screaming like a banshee, the banshee, the name banshee is a derivative, or it's like a anglicization. So it's it's been Englishized. But the root word, or the root words, because it's two words in Gaelic, that term is banshees. And the banshee, this one means good, and this one is roughly translates to people or folk. So the literal term is the good folk, and banshee, the one that we are referring to when we say screaming like a banshee, is a specific subtype that screams after the dead kind of thing. You don't need to know that for the test, but I thought it was kind of linguistically interesting. I was like, oh look, it's a reference to the sheep. And so there are all of these references kind of sprinkled throughout here. It's similar to, but not identical with, the Irish Pixies and that kind of thing. Okay, so we're literally, I'm going through the videos by how much I can fit on a whiteboard at any given time, so that's these things don't necessarily fit together logically, but I have to do a whiteboard and then stop and put in other stuff on a whiteboard and do it again, so we're halfway through a whiteboard. Okay, so in the middle of page 94, after the reference to the She, we've got this neat little passage. I mentioned it for you in class, but I want to call it out again here. Some say they went, blah, 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 blah. It comes up again later in the excerpt that I gave you. There's a reminder, but some say, like, and they give an alternate version of how this part of the story plays out. What I want to mention, like, the reason I'm mentioning this for you again is because there are, like, that signal phrase is doing a few key things, and I want us to kind of be aware of what those things are. So one of them is that the signal phrase is acknowledging that the narratives in this tradition do exist in multiple variants. And that's one of the characteristics of folklore and oral tradition, just kind of already anyway, like that's how that works. But it's also important in the context of this particular scribe who is writing it down for a couple of reasons. So the first one is in terms of pragmatics, and in linguistics, pragmatics is the term that refers to like everything about an utterance or a communicative exchange that is not, you know, like verbal data, right? So pragmatics includes the choice between tú and usted in Spanish, whether you call me ma'am or not. That's part of pragmatics, right? Like, do I need to call Dr. Carpenter ma'am? You know, like that's, it includes verbal data, like in the sense that it, like in Spanish, if you're making the choice between tú and usted, it changes how you conjugate the verbs, but it's not in and of itself a feature of a word choice or of syntax. Syntax means word order. So pragmatics is all of that stuff, the contextual elements that give a communicative exchange meaning for the participants. So in terms of the pragmatics of this written exchange, because the exchange part happens when somebody reads it, right? So there's a delayed reception. Part of what's going on there is that foregrounding, some say that the scribe is sort of disclaiming responsibility for this particular variant. It always is a he. He's not telling you this is definitely how it happened. He's just saying this is how some people tell it. And then later on he tells you like but there are some other people who say it went down like this. And so it's partly disclaiming responsibility, but also I think, and you could kind of argue about that, this third piece in the text, but I think there's a case to be made here that the way this is set up also is a nod to the existence of the scribal tradition and the residual manuscript orality that we talked about with Oren Soffer. Because, like, along the way to, you know, disclaiming responsibility and spelling out, like, these are different variants, the scribe is also aiming for comprehensiveness, right? I'm not going to give you just one version of the story. I'm going to make sure that I document all of them. Darn it. So there's that element as well, I think. And then, last but not least, a little farther down, inquiring minds just want to know. It says they went to Fornacht, the naked place, and where did we get the origin stories of so many place names, and they just kind of dropped this one out there, the naked place. And you could read that as like naked people were hanging out there, but it could also be like less salaciously. It could be like a hillside that has been stripped of trees, and you know when it first is introduced in the text, there are not those clues, right? So the immediate presence of that name on the page only gives us the naked place and kind of like leaves it hanging why we're calling it that. So anyway, that was all I could fit on this whiteboard. So I'm going to go record. I'm going to erase and rewrite and record another video for you. All right, bye.